Just to be honest, I mean,
if
one of your priorities is sustainment, then maybe it is. I might have to talk to you later. So we're going to go back up to the top. So that's how that. If you're wanting to give your priorities a weight, you have to select which local priority each project is addressing. So this happens to have 10 projects on it. So for all 10 projects, me being the cog, I would have to say this one's number 1, this is number 3, this is number 4, this is number 2. I'd have to do that all the way down. Maybe it's more than one. Maybe they're doing all of them. I mean, however many it's doing, whatever. This one is the no scale, meaning all priorities are equal on the local level. So, I've gotten the score sheet. It defaults to 100 points. If your scale is not 100 points, if it's 50 points, if it's 20 points, if it's 10 points, enter in whatever your scale is, whatever your CJD has approved for your points to be. I've defaulted it to 100, but you can type over it. You can do 10 if you want. That field is not locked. You can do it whatever you want.
Okay, so that total match is allowed for the local.
Total points on your score sheet. Not look. This is total
points.
Total points. All questions. Points. Maximum any project can score. Right now would be 100 points.
Based on what you just typed into the box.
Based off of what I just typed into the box.
If we want to do something as simple as a 10-point scale, we could split.
You could. It means that some of the questions may be worth 0.1 point. But you could do 10 points if you want, if that's what you want. It's set up so that it's just based off of formulas. So prioritization date, you would enter in, this one's going to be the General Victims Assistance scoring sheets. So you would enter in whatever your prioritization date is. So we're going to say it's April. Whatever. That did not work. Okay. So we'll say it's April 1st. I'm going to sit down because, I got to type. And then you start entering in your local priorities, and I was actually going to type in some actual priorities from some old strategic plans, but, my typing skills, that's just going to take too much time. So I'm just going to do this, just so that you can see how it works. You type in whatever your priorities are. I don't really know what they are right now. Okay. Those are all your choose this one. So this will be your local priorities, and there's no place for you to put a scale because this is the no scale sheet. So you don't put in the priority 1 gets 100% of the points, and priority 2 gets 80%, because we're assuming that all priorities are equal, and you're just scoring the priorities as a whole.
My CJD decided that our priorities are going to be the same as the state priorities plus a few extra.
You can only put in 5.
So we would repeat the state priorities here?
If that's what you want, but you can only put in 5, so your top 5, I would say.
All right.
So I'm going to reduce this view down just a little bit, just so I can see this whole thing. So there are a few questions in here that are standard. So you'll get cost and program effectiveness questions, and those are standard. So those are the activities reasonable? Does it avoid duplication? Are the items eligible? Are their targets appropriate? Does it meet all the eligibility requirements in the request for applications, including UCR reporting? Does the supporting data address significant problems? And then is the applicant on vendor hold? Those are standard. They're going to be in every single score sheet.
But the one about the UCR reporting, they have until August the 1st.
They do have until August 1st, but you may decide those that are current right now on UCR, they should get points. This is up to your CJD. Your CJD may go, I'm going to ignore that one and no one's going to get any points. But it's up to you guys. You can do 0 points. It's just they can get up to 5. But you may say those that right now are meeting the UCR should get some points. And those that aren't but will be, you would have to look at what's going on. Are they at 88% or are they at 50%? Are they 90% or are they at 85? Like, what is it? And then your CJAC could base whatever they feel is appropriate on what the current facts are for that program. Okay, so those are the standard questions. Then you have the option of adding additional questions, and you have to select at least one. The other questions and the optional questions, the total points for that is 30 points. If you decided to not do any questions and you used a 100-point scale, that means your project wouldn't score more than 70 points. Fine, because if they're all created equal and scored equally, then the max they can get is 70, fine. But if you only select one question, that one question will be worth 30 points, which could significantly affect the outcome of your scoring. So there are 4 drop-down options. So there are 4 questions with drop-down options. So there's some preloaded in questions, and what we did was we looked at, when you guys submitted your score sheets to us, I think this last time, we looked at all the score sheets and we looked at those questions that were common among the COGs. And these are the questions that were common, maybe worded a little differently, but the meaning were common among all the COGs. So we were like, hey, let's make these options available in our drop-down box. And so there's 4, you can choose up to 4 from this drop-down.
Or can you freelance?
You can freelance, you don't have to pick any out of the drop-down. You have 9 free type questions that you can type in. So if you liked all of the questions in the drop-down, you could start free typing in the rest of the questions from the drop-down in this other section. Because if you thought we were just so awesome that we captured everything and you wanted to use them all, then you could just free type whatever you want. If there's something unique for your region that we just didn't know about, then you can type in that question. So right now, I'm just going to do the top 4 from the list here. So you just select whatever questions your CJAC wants to use for their scoring. So I've done that. So using the drop-down. Like I said, you don't have to if you don't want to. And then, let's say that there are 2 other questions that your CJAC wants to add in. Because that's just, if you wanted to pick one from the drop-down and then custom the rest of them, you could. So you can set this part up however you want. So on the custom questions, again, I was going to actually type in some custom questions, but yeah, that's not going to happen. So we'll just type in some custom questions here. You do have to, see I'm checking this little box here. You do have to do that if you want the points to be added on a score sheet. I won't check this box here just so I can show you what happens. Okay, so we're done. We've now done everything that we have to on the data tab. So now what happens is when you go to App 1 here, let me take that down a little bit. So you'll see it has all of the applicant information loaded in for you. It has your prioritization date. It has all the stuff from that data tab pre-filled for you, including the solicitation name. Here are the priorities, the state priorities that were loaded in, and based off of what was selected for those state priorities, the points. And this means that for this project on direct, they're doing child abuse. They're providing services to child abuse victims. They can get up to 4 points for how well they address that state priority. They can't get 9 points for that. They can get up to 4 for the child abuse priority, up to 4 for the domestic violence, up to 4 for sexual assault, and up to 3 for any other violent crimes. So total, they can get 15 points here.
So that's for CJAC to score?
As I'm looking at the different sections on the score sheet, based on a 100-point scale, it would look as if the local priorities is going to be outweighing the state priorities.
No. The local priorities are worth 20 points and state priorities are worth 20 points.
Okay, I was just running the numbers there.
Yeah, well, there is a preference that will be given for the victim services projects. There is a preference that will be given if they're providing services to an underserved population, and that is 5 points. It is 5% of the total points, and this is a 100-point scale, so it's 5 points for the preference. But other than that, child abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault are equal in the state priorities, and then other violent crimes are slightly less. So if they're not doing an underserved population, if they're not providing services to an underserved population in the direct victim services, the maximum points they can get on this 100-point scale are 15 points. Now, what happens is, and I'll show you, I'll go back over to this data sheet. On this one, you can see this total is 15 points, right? So 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3, if my math is right, equals 15 points. If I go over here and I decide, I'm going to unprotect this real quick. If I decide they're not going to, they're actually not doing,
They don't do any of that, so they get full points.
I'm going to change this to 0. I'll show you what happens.
We can't change that, only y'all can, right?
Only we can.
And as you're doing that, if it's your claim, a quick question then, you're not going to see the individual score sheets, you're just going to see the total data sheets. So we're going to have to interpret to a certain extent whether or not the application is indeed providing core services to victims that promotes comprehensive victim restoration while incorporating an emphasis on cultural competency and underserved populations.
If we've selected that, if there's points in that, if there are points on the score sheet for that application, then we've said we think they're meeting this priority. It's up to the CJD to determine how well they're meeting it.
Okay, I was gonna ask that question, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was wanting to know if you guys were gonna put the points in there. If it would be-
Yes.
Okay.
It's done, I'll show you right now, it's done on these ones and zeros. It's a formula, it's done on these ones and zeros. So if you look at this, you can see how this, on that same application, the score changed. Because I said, now they're not doing, it's still 15 points, but it's changed because I've now said they're not doing DWI, victims of DWI, or what are, survivors of homicide. They're not doing that anymore. Now they're just doing child abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault. So,
and I hate to be stupid, but when we'll be getting customized by applicant, almost pre-started forms for each application will be considered by the CJD, and that section
yes.
will be scored by you all.
No, it will be scored by the CJD.
So they are going to have to make an interpretation as to if that particular factor is used, whether or not the applicant is in fact providing core services to the comprehensive.
For this particular project, let's say that they're scoring this one, they have to determine here how well the project is serving child abuse victims, how well they're serving domestic violence victims, and how well they're serving sexual assault victims, because those are the only 3 state priorities that we've determined they're meeting. You can see the max points allowed is 0 here, so they don't get any points for that, because we've said they don't meet that priority. So this is what you have to do when they're scoring state priorities. They have to look at the max points allowed right here. So right here, this tells them how many points they can award for that priority.
Okay.
And then over here is where they tell you
0.
So
Zero.
they'll